What if the biggest obstacle to your financial success isn't your job, your education, or the economy, but the quiet psychological programming that has been running your decisions since childhood? You sit down to look at your bank account. The number is lower than you want it to be. You feel that familiar tightness in your chest. You tell yourself this is the month you will finally get it together. You make a plan. 3 days later, you find yourself spending money on something you do not need, and the cycle begins again. This is not another lecture on budgeting or investing. It is a roadmap to understanding why your mind has been quietly working against your financial survival for years, and how to finally rewire the invisible forces keeping you trapped. By the time you finish listening, you will understand why your relationship with money has nothing to do with how much you know about finances, and everything to do with who you believe you are when you have it. But here is what most people never notice. Money is never just money. It carries a hidden weight. It represents something much deeper in your psychology. For some, it is safety. For others, it is worthiness. For many, it is a mirror reflecting the most hidden parts of their identity. The reason most financial advice fails is not because the strategies are wrong. It is because they address the symptom while ignoring the disease. You can learn about compound interest and tax optimization all day long. But if your subconscious mind believes that having money makes you a bad person, or that you do not deserve abundance, no spreadsheet in the world will save you. And this changes everything. Because once you understand that your financial reality is primarily an output of your psychological reality, you stop fighting symptoms and start treating causes. You stop blaming external circumstances and start examining internal programming. Think about the very first time you understood what money meant in your family. Maybe you heard your parents arguing about bills in the next room. Maybe you watched your mother clip coupons with anxious precision. Maybe your father worked himself to exhaustion and still seemed stressed about finances. These moments were not just observations, they were installations. They wrote code into your developing brain about what money represents, how it flows, who gets to have it, and what it costs. Very few people realize this. The emotions attached to those early money memories become your default financial operating system. If money was associated with stress in your childhood, your nervous system will automatically trigger stress responses when you start to accumulate it. If having money was associated with greed in your family, you will find mysterious ways to get rid of it when it comes into your life. Now something uncomfortable happens. You start to see that your financial patterns are not random. They are faithful executions of deeply held beliefs you did not choose but have never examined. The late fees, the impulse purchases, the undercharging for your work, the inability to save. These are not separate problems. They are different expressions of the same psychological root. The next part is difficult to accept. You've been loyal to your financial identity, even when it hurts you. There is a strange comfort in the familiar, even when the familiar is painful. You know who you are when you are struggling. You know how to navigate the world from that position. But becoming someone with money requires becoming someone you do not yet recognize. And the mind resists that kind of transformation with remarkable tenacity. Think about the last time you had an opportunity to increase your income or decrease your expenses in a meaningful way. Not a small change, but something that would have shifted your financial trajectory. What happened? Maybe you procrastinated. Maybe you found reasons why it would not work. Maybe you felt a strange resistance you could not name. That resistance was not laziness. It was your psychology protecting the identity it knows. This is where the real problem begins, because your financial identity is not just about money. It is connected to your sense of belonging. In many families and communities, there is an unspoken rule about who gets to be wealthy and who does not. Stepping outside that rule can feel like betrayal. It can trigger a deep fear of rejection. The mind calculates that it is safer to stay financially limited but connected to your tribe than to become prosperous but alone. But here is what most people never notice. This fear operates below conscious awareness. You do not walk around thinking that you are limiting your income because you are afraid your friends will not like you anymore. Instead, you just notice a vague discomfort when opportunities arise. A subtle pulling back. A quiet self-sabotage that seems to come from nowhere. And this changes everything. Because the solution is not to push through the discomfort with willpower. The solution is to bring these hidden dynamics into the light, to see them for what they are, to recognize that you are not fighting external obstacles as much as internal programming that was installed before you had any say in the matter. Consider how you feel when you see someone who has significant wealth, not the surface reaction you think you should have, but the immediate, unfiltered emotional response that happens before your conscious mind can edit it. For many people, there is a flicker of resentment, a subtle judgment, a quick rationalization about how they probably got that money unfairly. These reactions reveal more about your relationship with money than any financial statement ever could. Very few people realize this. Your judgments about wealthy people are actually projections of your own conflicted feelings about having money yourself. If you secretly believe that having wealth makes people selfish, then part of you will resist becoming wealthy to avoid becoming someone you despise. If you believe that money corrupts, then your subconscious will protect you from corruption by keeping you poor. Now, something uncomfortable happens. You start to see that your financial limitations might actually be serving a psychological purpose. They might be protecting you from something you fear even more than being broke. Becoming someone different. Outgrowing relationships. Losing your innocence. Facing the complexity that comes with having resources and therefore having choices. The next part is difficult to accept. Some part of you prefers the clarity of limitation. When you do not have money, your choices are constrained. You do not have to face the existential weight of what you might do with freedom. You do not have to confront the question of who you become when you can actually have what you want. Limitation simplifies life in a way that abundance complicates it. Think about your spending patterns, not the practical logic behind them, but the emotional logic. When you spend money, you do not have on things you do not need. You are not being foolish. You are trying to solve an emotional problem with a financial solution. You are trying to buy relief from a feeling that has nothing to do with the object you are purchasing. This is where the real problem begins. Because the relief is always temporary. The feeling returns, and you are back to the same pattern, wondering why you cannot seem to control yourself. But self-control is not the issue. The issue is that you are using money as a tool for emotional regulation without understanding what emotion you are actually trying to regulate. But here is what most people never notice. The emotions that drive financial self-sabotage are usually not about money at all. They are about worth. They are about belonging. They are about safety. They are about identity. Money just happens to be the arena where these deeper dynamics play out. And this changes everything, because when you start to address the underlying emotional needs directly, the financial symptoms often resolve themselves. When you feel worthy without having to prove it through possessions, impulse spending loses its power. When you feel secure without having to hoard resources, excessive frugality relaxes. When you know you belong regardless of your financial status, the need to perform wealth or poverty disappears. Consider your relationship with work, not just what you do, but how you feel about being compensated for it. Do you feel uncomfortable asking for what you are worth? Do you minimize your contributions? Do you feel guilty when you are well paid for something that comes easily to you? These patterns reveal a deep belief that value must come through suffering, that ease is suspicious, that you do not deserve reward unless you have struggled for it. Very few people realize this. This belief runs deep in many cultures. It equates struggle with virtue and ease with moral suspicion. It creates a perverse incentive structure where you unconsciously make your financial life harder than it needs to be, because difficulty feels like proof of your goodness. Now something uncomfortable happens. You start to see that some of your financial struggles might actually be a form of self-justification, a way to prove to yourself and others that you are a good person who works hard, a way to avoid the moral ambiguity that comes with having resources without visible struggle. The next part is difficult to accept. You might be more attached to your financial struggles than you want to admit, not because you enjoy suffering, but because your struggles have become part of your story, part of how you understand yourself, part of what makes you feel real and grounded and human. Letting go of that identity, even for something better, creates a kind of existential vertigo that most people avoid without even knowing they are avoiding it. Think about the last time you received money unexpectedly. A gift, a bonus, a tax return, something you did not have to suffer for. How did it feel? For many people, there is an immediate anxiety, a sense that this money is not quite real, a subtle pressure to get rid of it quickly before something bad happens. This is not superstition. It is your psychology trying to restore the familiar pattern of struggle that your identity depends on. This is where the real problem begins, because your mind does not just prefer familiar patterns, it actively works to maintain them. When something threatens to shift your financial reality in a positive direction, your subconscious will generate thoughts, feelings, and behaviors designed to bring you back to baseline. It will create emergencies. It will inspire impulsive decisions. It will whisper rationalizations that sound reasonable, but serve the function of keeping you where you have always been. But here is what most people never notice. This is not a flaw in your psychology. It is a feature. Your mind is designed to maintain equilibrium, to keep you in the range of experience that it has mapped as safe and known. The problem is not that your mind is broken. The problem is that the equilibrium it is maintaining was set during circumstances that no longer apply to your life. And this changes everything, because you do not need to fight your mind. You need to update its map. You need to give it new experiences that expand its definition of normal. You need to gradually show it that having money can be safe, that success does not require isolation, that abundance does not corrupt, that you can outgrow your financial history without losing your soul. You are not afraid of being poor. You are afraid of who you would have to become to be wealthy. Think about what you actually believe would change if you had more money. Not the fantasy version where everything becomes perfect, but the honest assessment of what would shift. Would you feel safer? Would you feel more worthy? Would you feel less anxious? Would you feel more powerful? These answers reveal what you have been using money to symbolize and why not having it feels like a threat to something essential. Very few people realize this. The intensity of your desire for money is usually proportional to the intensity of the emotional need you are hoping it will fulfill. If you desperately want money, it is usually because you desperately want something else that you have unconsciously linked to financial resources. Safety, respect, freedom, love, belonging, power. These are the actual currencies you are seeking. Money is just the symbol you have been taught to pursue. Now something uncomfortable happens. You start to see that even if you got all the money you wanted, you might not get what you actually need, because the emotional need was never really about money. It was about something deeper that money cannot directly provide. This is why so many people who achieve financial success still feel empty. They got the symbol, but missed the substance. The next part is difficult to accept. Your financial pursuit might have been a sophisticated form of avoidance, a way to feel like you are making progress without addressing the underlying emotional wounds that money was supposed to heal, a way to stay in motion without having to stop and feel what is actually missing. Think about the stories you tell yourself about why you do not have more money. The external explanations. The timing. The opportunities you missed. The disadvantages you faced. There is usually truth in these stories, but there is also usually an unconscious function. These narratives protect you from a more terrifying possibility. The possibility that the main obstacle has been inside you all along. This is where the real problem begins, because as long as the obstacle is out there, you do not have to face the obstacle in here. As long as you are waiting for the right opportunity, you do not have to examine why you have resisted the opportunities that have already appeared. As long as the problem is the economy or your industry or your background, you do not have to confront the ways you have participated in your own limitation. But here is what most people never notice. This externalization is not dishonest. It feels completely genuine from the inside. You are not deliberately avoiding self-examination. You are just following the path of least psychological resistance. It is genuinely easier to focus on what is happening out there than to examine what is happening in here, and this changes everything. Because the moment you recognize this dynamic, you gain power over it. Not the power to immediately transform your financial life, but the power to see your own participation in your patterns. And that seeing changes everything, even before you take a single external action. Consider what happens in your body when you think about money. Not the thoughts themselves, but the physical sensations. Tightness in the chest, clenching in the stomach, shallow breathing. These somatic responses reveal that your relationship with money is not just cognitive, it is embodied. Your nervous system has learned to associate money with threat, and it responds accordingly, even when there is no actual danger present. Very few people realize this. You cannot think your way out of a nervous system response. You cannot logic your way past a physical reaction that was trained into your body through years of experience. This is why financial advice so often fails. It addresses the mind while ignoring the body that is actually driving much of the behavior. Now, something uncomfortable happens. You start to see that your financial patterns are not just habits. They are trauma responses, not necessarily from catastrophic events, but from the accumulated stress of living in a state of financial anxiety for years. Your nervous system has organized itself around survival, and it treats financial decisions as matters of life and death, even when they are not. The next part is difficult to accept. You cannot create financial abundance with a nervous system organized around scarcity. You cannot make long-term decisions with a body that is constantly preparing for emergency. The psychology and the physiology are inseparable, and working with one while ignoring the other is a recipe for frustration. Think about the moments when you have made your worst financial decisions, not just what you did, but how you felt in your body before you did it. Most likely, there was some form of activation, stress, anxiety, urgency, a sense that you had to act now, that you could not wait, that something bad would happen if you did not make this decision immediately. This activation is not random. It is your nervous system taking over your decision-making process. This is where the real problem begins. Because when your nervous system is activated, it does not make decisions based on long-term well-being. It makes decisions based on immediate survival. It optimizes for the reduction of present discomfort rather than the creation of future stability. This means that the worse you feel, the worse your financial decisions become, creating a downward spiral that is difficult to escape. But here is what most people never notice. This spiral is not a character flaw. It is a physiological pattern. It can be interrupted, not through willpower or financial education, but through learning to regulate your nervous system, through learning to notice when you are activated and waiting until you are calm before making financial decisions. And this changes everything, because it gives you a practical tool that works at the level where the problem actually exists, not in your thoughts about money, but in your body's response to money. Not in your financial knowledge, but in your capacity to stay present and regulated when making decisions that affect your future. Consider your relationship with financial information. Do you seek it out or avoid it? Do you check your accounts regularly or let them go unexamined? Do you educate yourself about money or find the topic overwhelming or boring? These patterns reveal how your nervous system has categorized financial information. For many people, it has been categorized as threatening, something to be avoided rather than engaged with. Very few people realize this. Financial avoidance is not laziness or irresponsibility. It is a protective strategy. Your nervous system has learned that looking at your finances creates distress, so it motivates you to avoid looking. This makes perfect sense from a survival perspective. If something causes pain, avoid it. The problem is that this strategy, while protective in the short term, is destructive in the long term. Now something uncomfortable happens. You start to see that your avoidance of financial reality has been making your financial reality worse, that the thing you had been avoiding because it causes anxiety has been growing more anxiety-producing the longer you avoid it, that the protective strategy has become the source of the threat it was trying to protect you from. The next part is difficult to accept. You have been participating in the self-reinforcing cycle where avoidance creates ignorance. Ignorance creates anxiety. Anxiety creates more avoidance, and the whole system maintains itself indefinitely. Breaking this cycle requires not just financial education, but nervous system regulation. Think about what it would feel like to approach your finances with curiosity rather than dread, to look at your accounts as information rather than judgment, to engage with financial decisions as interesting problems rather than existential threats. This shift in emotional tone is not just pleasant, it is practically transformative. It changes the quality of your attention, the accuracy of your perception, and the wisdom of your decisions. This is where the real problem begins. Because this emotional shift is not something you can force through willpower. You cannot just decide to feel differently about money. You have to create the conditions where different feelings can naturally arise. This often requires working with your nervous system directly through practices that increase your capacity to stay present with discomfort without being overwhelmed by it. But here is what most people never notice. Your capacity to handle financial reality is directly related to your capacity to handle emotional reality. The more you can tolerate uncomfortable feelings without immediately escaping into avoidance or impulsive action, the more clearly you can see your financial situation and make wise decisions about it. And this changes everything, because it connects financial growth with emotional growth. It suggests that becoming better with money is not just about learning new information, but about developing new capacities. It reframes financial improvement as a path of personal development rather than just a technical skill to be acquired. Consider the role of guilt in your financial life. Not just the obvious guilt about specific purchases, but the background guilt that hums beneath many of your financial decisions. The guilt of having more than others. The guilt of wanting more than you have. The guilt of not doing more with what you have. This guilt acts as a constant tax on your financial well-being, draining energy that could be directed toward building rather than justifying. Very few people realize this. Guilt about money is rarely about actual harm done. It is about perceived violation of some internalized rule about proper relationship to resources. And these rules were usually written by people and circumstances that no longer have authority over your life. Now something uncomfortable happens. You start to see that you have been apologizing for financial choices that do not require apology. You have been carrying guilt that does not belong to you. You have been operating as if you need permission to have what you want, permission that was never going to come from the sources you have been waiting for. The next part is difficult to accept. Some part of you believes that wanting money makes you selfish, that pursuing wealth makes you shallow, that prioritizing your financial well-being makes you disconnected from the suffering of others. And these beliefs have been quietly undermining your ability to make clear, self-interested financial decisions. Think about the last time you made a financial decision that was clearly in your best interest but felt somehow wrong. Maybe you negotiated a higher salary. Maybe you declined to help someone financially when you could afford it. Maybe you invested in yourself rather than giving to others. The discomfort you felt was not about the decision itself. It was about the identity shift required to make that kind of decision consistently. This is where the real problem begins, because your financial life requires a certain kind of person, a person who can prioritize their own needs without excessive guilt, a person who can hold resources without feeling like they are taking from others, a person who can make self-interested decisions without feeling selfish. And becoming that person requires an identity shift that most people resist without even knowing they are resisting. But here is what most people never notice. This identity shift is not about becoming selfish. It is about becoming whole. It is about integrating the part of you that has needs with the part of you that cares about others. It is about recognizing that taking care of yourself financially is not a violation of your values, but an expression of them. And this changes everything, because it allows you to begin to see self-interest as a foundation rather than a threat. You can start to understand that the person who takes care of themselves financially has more resources available for others, not fewer. You can begin to reconcile the parts of yourself that have been in conflict. Consider what money represents in your most private thoughts, not the public story about security or freedom, but the private associations that arise when you are completely honest with yourself. For many people, money represents love. Not literally, but symbolically. It represents the attention they did not get, the approval they craved, the sense of mattering that they have been chasing since childhood. Very few people realize this. When money represents love, no amount is ever enough, because the hunger for love cannot be satisfied by financial accumulation. The hole that needs filling is not financial but emotional. And every financial achievement that fails to fill it just confirms the depth of the emptiness. Now something uncomfortable happens. You start to see that some of your financial striving might be misplaced, that you might be trying to solve an emotional problem with a financial solution, that the thing you are really hungry for cannot be purchased with any currency. The next part is difficult to accept. Your financial pursuit might be a form of emotional avoidance, a way to feel like you are making progress on something without having to face the actual thing that is missing. A sophisticated distraction that keeps you moving without requiring you to stop and feel what is really going on. Think about the moments when you have achieved something financially and felt the strange emptiness that sometimes follows. The achievement that was supposed to feel fulfilling but did not. The milestone that was supposed to matter but somehow did not. These moments of flatness amid achievement reveal the gap between what you were really seeking and what you actually got. This is where the real problem begins, because if money represents love, then financial success creates a crisis. You got what you were pursuing, but you did not get what you needed. This discrepancy can be more painful than never getting anything at all, because it forces you to confront the possibility that you've been chasing the wrong thing. But here is what most people never notice. This crisis is actually an opportunity. It is a moment of clarity where the symbol is separated from what it represents. It is a chance to see that the hunger was not really for money, but for something else entirely. And that seeing, while painful, opens the door to actually getting what you need. And this changes everything, because it redirects your energy from financial accumulation to emotional fulfillment. It allows you to use money as a tool rather than a symbol. It transforms your financial life from a quest for love into a practical domain that can support your emotional life rather than substitute for it. Consider your relationship with giving and receiving money, not the abstract principles, but the actual feelings that arise when money moves in either direction. For many people, there is asymmetry. They are more comfortable giving than receiving, or more comfortable receiving than giving. This asymmetry reveals deeper patterns about worth, power, and connection. Very few people realize this. Difficulty receiving money often reflects difficulty receiving other forms of goodness. If you feel unworthy of financial gifts, you probably feel unworthy of other forms of generosity as well. The money is just the most concrete expression of a broader pattern of rejecting what is offered. Now something uncomfortable happens. You start to see that your financial limitations might be partly maintained by your difficulty receiving, that the universe or other people might be offering you opportunities that you are unconsciously refusing, that the flow of resources toward you might be blocked not by external circumstances, but by your own resistance to incoming flow. The next part is difficult to accept. Your discomfort with receiving might be disguised as humility or generosity, but it is actually a form of self-rejection. It is a way of saying through action rather than words that you do not deserve what is being offered. And this self-rejection limits not just your financial life, but your entire experience of goodness. Think about the last time someone wanted to give you something financial, a gift, a payment for your work, an opportunity to earn. What happened inside you? Did you accept it fully, or did you find some way to minimize it, refuse it, or give something back to balance the scales? These responses reveal your relationship with receiving, and they have profound implications for your financial life. This is where the real problem begins, because if you cannot receive fully, you cannot accumulate fully. If every incoming flow is partially blocked by resistance, you will always have less than you might otherwise have. Not because the flow is not available, but because you are standing in its path. But here is what most people never notice. This resistance to receiving is not stubbornness or ingratitude. It is a protective strategy. It is a way to avoid the vulnerability that comes with being indebted to someone. It is a way to maintain independence and control. And these are understandable concerns, but they come at a significant cost, and this changes everything. Because when you see the function of your resistance, you can address the underlying concern directly, rather than through financial self-limitation. You can find ways to receive that do not compromise your sense of autonomy. You can develop relationships where giving and receiving flow naturally, without creating uncomfortable dynamics of obligation. Consider what would be possible if you stopped using money as a measure of your worth, to stop evaluating yourself based on what you have or what you earn, to stop comparing your financial situation to others as a way of determining your value as a person. This decoupling of worth from wealth would transform not just your financial experience, but your entire experience of yourself. Very few people realize this. The conflation of worth and wealth is not just an intellectual error. It is an emotional attachment. It is a way of feeling valuable that you learned early and have never questioned. It creates a kind of emotional dependency where your sense of self rises and falls with your financial fortune. Now something uncomfortable happens. You start to see how much of your emotional life has been organized around this conflation. How much energy has gone into maintaining a financial image that supports your sense of worth? How much anxiety has been generated by the gap between where you are and where you feel you need to be valuable? The next part is difficult to accept. Your worth is not actually determined by your wealth, but you have organized your emotional life as if it were. You have created a kind of emotional addiction where you need certain financial markers to feel okay about yourself. And this addiction drives behavior that might not serve your actual financial interests. Think about what you would do differently if you genuinely believed that your worth was independent of your wealth. If you knew in your bones that having less did not make you less. If you could separate your financial decisions from your need to feel valuable, this freedom would change not just what you decided, but how you felt about your decisions. This is where the real problem begins, because this kind of decoupling requires experiencing yourself as valuable in ways that do not depend on external validation. It requires developing sources of worth that cannot be taken away by market fluctuations or financial setbacks. It requires a kind of self-knowing that transcends circumstances. But here is what most people never notice. This decoupling is not just psychologically healthy, it is practically advantageous. When your sense of worth is not on the line in every financial decision, you make better decisions. You think more clearly. You take more appropriate risks. You persist through setbacks without being devastated by them. And this changes everything, because it means that addressing your worth issues is not separate from addressing your financial issues. It is actually foundational to them. It means that the psychological work of developing unconditional self-worth is some of the most practical financial work you can do. Consider what it would feel like to make peace with your financial situation as it is right now. Not to give up on improvement, but to stop being at war with reality. To accept where you are without judgment while still moving toward where you want to be. This kind of radical acceptance creates a foundation for change that fighting never could. Very few people realize this. The war with your financial reality consumes enormous energy that could be directed toward improvement. The judgment, the shame, the frustration, the resentment. These are not just unpleasant feelings. They are drains on the psychological resources you need for actual change. Now something uncomfortable happens. You start to see how much of your financial experience has been colored by your reaction to it, rather than the reality of it. How much suffering has been added on top of the practical challenges through your resistance to what is. How much of your financial pain has been self-created rather than externally imposed. The next part is difficult to accept. Your resistance to your financial reality might be making your financial reality worse, not just emotionally, but practically. The energy consumed by resistance is energy not available for improvement. The clarity obscured by judgment is clarity not available for wise decision-making. Think about what would be possible if you could look at your financial situation with clear eyes, if you could see it accurately without the distortion of shame or blame, if you could assess it objectively and then decide what to do from that clear place rather than from a place of reactivity. This is where the real problem begins. Because this kind of clear seeing requires setting down the weapons you have been using against yourself. It requires stopping the war long enough to see the battlefield clearly. It requires a kind of self-compassion that feels dangerous to the parts of you that believe suffering is necessary for change. But here is what most people never notice. Acceptance is not resignation. It is the foundation for effective action. It is the difference between acting from clarity and acting from reactivity. It is the space where real choice becomes possible rather than just automatic response. And this changes everything, because it means that the path to financial improvement goes through acceptance rather than around it. It means that making peace with where you are is actually a step toward changing where you are. It means that the compassion you have been withholding from yourself might be exactly what you need to move forward. Consider what your financial life would look like if it were an expression of self-respect rather than self-doubt. If your spending reflected your value for yourself rather than your uncertainty about your worth. If your earning reflected your belief in your contribution rather than your need to prove something. This shift from doubt to respect transforms everything about how money moves through your life. Very few people realize this. Financial behavior is always an expression of self-concept. How you handle money reveals what you believe about yourself. The under-earning reflects feeling undeserving. The overspending reflects seeking external validation. The financial chaos reflects internal chaos. The patterns are not random. They are faithful expressions of deeper beliefs. Now something uncomfortable happens. You start to see that your financial life has been a mirror reflecting your relationship with yourself, that the problems you've been trying to solve financially are actually problems in how you relate to yourself, that the transformation you are seeking is not primarily financial but personal. The next part is difficult to accept. You cannot solve a self-respect problem with a financial solution. You can earn more, save more, invest more, and still feel the same fundamental lack if the underlying self-concept has not shifted. The financial improvement will feel hollow because the person experiencing it has not changed. Think about what it would feel like to operate from genuine self-respect, to make financial decisions that reflected your value for yourself, to handle money in ways that demonstrated belief in your worth. This is not about spending more or less. It is about spending and earning and saving from a different place inside yourself. This is where the real problem begins, because self-respect cannot be fake. You cannot just decide to respect yourself and have it be so. It has to be earned through actions that demonstrate respect. And these actions are often uncomfortable because they require going against patterns that have become familiar. But here is what most people never notice. Self-respect is built through small acts of self-honoring, through keeping promises to yourself, through making choices that reflect your value even when no one is watching, through treating yourself as someone worth taking care of. And these small acts accumulate into a sense of worth that transforms your relationship with everything, including money. And this changes everything, because it means that financial transformation is ultimately about self-transformation. It means that becoming better with money is inseparable from becoming more respectful of yourself. It means that the financial life you want is waiting on the other side of becoming the person who could have that life without destroying themselves with it. Consider what it would feel like to stop waiting for permission, to stop looking for external validation before you allow yourself to have what you want, to stop needing someone else to confirm that your desires are legitimate before you pursue them. This shift from seeking permission to granting it to yourself transforms your relationship with desire itself. Very few people realize this. The waiting for permission is often unconscious. You do not walk around thinking that you need someone to approve of your goals before you can pursue them. Instead, you just notice a hesitation, a sense that you need to wait, a feeling that it is not quite time yet. And this hesitation protects you from the vulnerability of fully committing. Now, something uncomfortable happens. You start to see how much of your life has been spent in the waiting room. How many desires have been deferred pending approval that was never going to come. How much energy has gone into seeking permission from people who were never going to give it. The next part is difficult to accept. No one is coming to give you permission. No external authority is going to confirm that your desires are valid. No one is going to tell you that it is okay to want what you want and to pursue it without apology. If it is going to happen, you are going to have to do it for yourself. Think about what you would do if you did not need anyone's approval, if you could pursue your desires without worrying about whether they were legitimate, if you could want what you want without shame. This freedom from permission-seeking opens possibilities that permission-asking closes. This is where the real problem begins. Because this kind of self-permission feels dangerous. It feels like arrogance. It feels like the kind of selfishness you have been taught to avoid. And these feelings keep you seeking permission even when you know intellectually that no one is going to give it. But here is what most people never notice. Self-permission is not selfishness. It is self-respect. It is not arrogance. It is authenticity. It is not rejecting connection with others. It is grounding yourself in your own truth, so you can connect from a place of wholeness rather than need. And this changes everything, because it means that the approval you have been seeking was never the real issue. The real issue was your relationship with your own desires. The real freedom comes not from getting permission, but from no longer needing it. The real transformation happens when you become the authority you have been waiting for. Consider what it would feel like to stop performing your financial life for an audience, to stop managing impressions, to stop caring how your financial decisions look to others. This privacy would transform not just what you decided, but how you felt about your decisions. It would free you to make choices based on your actual needs rather than your imagined perceptions. Very few people realize this. Much financial behavior is performative. The purchases designed to communicate success, the frugality designed to communicate success, the frugality designed to communicate virtue, the generosity designed to communicate worth. These performances consume resources without meeting needs because they are organized around perception rather than reality. Now something uncomfortable happens. You start to see how much of your financial life has been a performance for an audience that probably is not even paying attention. How much energy has gone into managing impressions that may not matter? How much of your financial pressure is self-created through concern about how you appear? The next part is difficult to accept. The audience you have been performing for is largely imaginary. The people whose opinions you have been managing probably have their own concerns and are not actually paying that much attention to your financial behavior. The performance has been for ghosts rather than real people. Think about what you would do with money if no one were watching, if there were no impressions to manage, if your financial life were completely private. This thought experiment reveals how much of your financial behavior is organized around perception rather than genuine preference. This is where the real problem begins, because letting go of the performance requires letting go of the validation that comes with it. It requires accepting that some of what you have been getting from your financial behavior is not going to be available anymore. It requires finding other sources for needs that have been met through impression management. But here is what most people never notice. The validation from performance is thin and unsatisfying anyway. It requires constant maintenance. It is never quite enough. And letting go of it opens the possibility of more authentic forms of connection that do not depend on financial performance. And this changes everything, because it means that the privacy you have been avoiding might actually be a relief. It means that letting go of the performance might free up resources for things that actually matter to you. It means that becoming less concerned with how you appear might paradoxically make you more genuinely connected to others. Consider what it would feel like to stop fighting your financial past, to stop trying to compensate for earlier mistakes, to stop letting historical regret determine present choices. This release from the past would free you to make decisions based on current reality rather than historical guilt. Very few people realize this. Much financial behavior is driven by historical compensation rather than present needs, the overworking to make up for earlier laziness, the extreme frugality to make up for earlier spending, the excessive caution to make up for earlier risk. These compensatory patterns do not serve the present. They just continue the past under a different guise. Now, something uncomfortable happens. You start to see how much of your current financial life is still organized around events that are over, how much energy is still going into fights that have already been lost, how much of your present is being sacrificed to a past that cannot be changed. The next part is difficult to accept. You cannot compensate your way out of financial history. You cannot undo past mistakes through present punishment. You cannot earn redemption through suffering. The attempt to do so just extends the damage of the original mistake into the present moment. Think about what would be possible if you could truly let your financial past be past. If you could make decisions based on what makes sense now, rather than what would have made sense then. If you could release yourself from the obligation to pay for historical errors through present deprivation. This is where the real problem begins. Because this kind of release feels dangerous. It feels like letting yourself off the hook. It feels like the kind of irresponsibility that led to the original problems, and these feelings keep you locked in compensatory patterns that do not actually help. But here is what most people never notice. Punishing yourself for past mistakes does not prevent future mistakes. It just adds present suffering to past regret. The guilt that is supposed to motivate better behavior actually consumes the energy you need for better behavior. The atonement that is supposed to provide closure just extends the pain. And this changes everything, because it means that releasing the past is not irresponsible. It is actually the most responsible thing you can do. It means that forgiving yourself for financial mistakes is not weakness but wisdom. It means that the freedom you need to make better decisions comes from letting go of the ones you have already made. There is a quiet power in simply stopping. Stopping the chase. Stopping the shame. Stopping the endless strategizing that substitutes for genuine change. When you stop, you create space. And in that space, something new becomes possible. Not something loud, not something dramatic, just a different way of being with money. A way that is not driven by fear or guilt or the need to prove something. A way that is grounded in reality rather than fantasy. A way that honors who you actually are rather than who you think you need to be. This is not about becoming wealthy. It is about becoming whole. It is about healing the relationship between who you are and the resources that flow through your life. It is about removing the psychological obstacles that have been standing between you and the financial reality you say you want. You do not need to become a different person. You need to become a more honest person. Honest about what you actually feel. Honest about what you actually want. Honest about the ways you have been using money to avoid facing things that have nothing to do with money. When you bring this kind of honesty to your financial life, something shifts. Not overnight, not dramatically, but quietly. The patterns that seemed immovable begin to loosen. The resistance that seemed insurmountable begins to soften. The clarity that seemed impossible begins to emerge. You stop fighting yourself and start understanding yourself. You stop judging your patterns and start observing them. You stop trying to force change and start allowing transformation. This is the path forward, not through more information but through deeper awareness, not through stronger willpower but through greater compassion, not through fighting your psychology but through making peace with it. The psychology that has been keeping you poor is not your enemy. It is a part of you that is trying to protect you, using strategies that no longer serve you. When you can see this, everything changes. Not because the patterns disappear, but because your relationship to them transforms. And that transformation changes everything.